Ladies and gentlemen, class is in session. Today, we are going to be teaching you how to run one of the most iconic adventures for the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition rule set. The adventure that almost every Dungeon Master has run at one time or another and is almost a rite of passage for the 5th edition rule set. I am of course talking about the Lost Mines of Phandelver. Now, without further ado, let's get into part 1 of this lesson on how to run the Lost Mine of Phandelver. With the Lost Mines of Phandelver being the starter set adventure for the 5th edition game, there's a lot of useful information for new Dungeon Masters getting into Dungeon Mastering and the 5th edition game for the very first time. As part of the set, you also get pre-generated character sheets for players to use if they decide to not create their own character, as well as a rulebook with all the monster stat blocks and rules for how to run the game. The Lost Mines of Phandelver takes place in the Sword Coasts, in the world known as the Forgotten Realms. Now, the Forgotten Realms should be familiar to anybody that's familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, as it's the primary setting that Wizards of the Coast uses for any of their pre-written modules, but you can easily import this adventure into your homebrew worlds if you so choose. Now, this guide is going to focus mainly on how to run the adventure as written, but you can easily add the town of Phandalin and its characters anywhere in the world, so long as that there's a mountain range nearby or a similar topography that will make sense for this adventure. The setup for the adventure and the history that's given within the starter set is done really well and does give the DM a really good background on what to expect when they're running the adventure. More than 500 years ago, in the land of the Forgotten Realms, in a region known as the Sword Coast, dwarves and gnomes made an agreement in order to share the riches of a mine in a cavern known as Wave Echo Cave. In addition to the many riches found here, a great magical power was also discovered. Allying themselves with human spellcasters, magic items were crafted via a great forge known here as the Forge of Spells. As with many events in history, peace did not last long. The mine was overrun by rampaging orcs and mercenary wizards. The human wizards, dwarves, and gnomes that had allied themselves with each other fought against these intruders. Over the course of many battles, cave-ins, and tremors, much of the mine, as well as those inside it, were destroyed. For many years, rumors circulated about these riches that are still abound in a mine that was eventually lost to time. Recently, new people have resettled in the area, but more importantly, a trio of dwarven brothers known as the Rock Seekers. These brothers discovered a new lost entrance to Wave Echo Cave and had hoped to reopen the mines. Unfortunately for them, they aren't the only ones that are interested in these riches. A villain known as the Black Spider, mystery to many, and his new allied minions of goblins and bandits also expressed interest in what these caves hold within. The Black Spider wants it all for himself and is now taking steps to ensure that no one else can find this cave entrance. The players are brought into the story when their friend, Gundren Rockseeker, yes, the Gundren Rockseeker, one of the Rockseeker brothers, hires them to escort a wagon to Phandalin from the city of Neverwinter. Gundren has already gone ahead with his warrior friend, Sildar Hallwinter, for protection and to attend to business in town while the characters follow with supplies. The characters would pay 10 gold pieces each by the owner of Barthen's Provisions in Phandalin when they successfully deliver the wagon safely to the trading post. The Lost Mine of Phandelver takes place over the course of 4 parts. Now, we'll be covering each part in their own video in the future here on the channel, but for now, let's set up the adventure to put you, the Dungeon Master, in the best position for success. Now, there are many ways that you can actually run this game and run combat in this game. You can play via virtual tabletop, you can do Theater of the Mind, or you can even use miniatures and maps that you actually plot out on your dining room table. Regardless of where and how you run your games and the medium you choose to do so, I highly recommend that you utilize a note-taking system that works well for you. I personally like to use OneNote to organize all my notes, and this is mainly because trying to flip through an adventure booklet or pages and stuff like that can be very cumbersome when you're at the table and can really disrupt the flow of the game. With all that being said, let's jump over the computer so I can show you how I utilize OneNote to organize my thoughts and my notes for the Lost Mines of Phandelver. Now that we're over here at the computer, I do want to still wholeheartedly encourage you to read the Lost Mines of Phandelver as the Dungeon Master at least once before you actually jump into just running the adventure, just mainly because it gives you a good context to the background, what's to come, the different parts. As you can see here, I have the background that we've kind of already talked about. We have the adventure overview that goes to the 4 parts, including Goblin Arrows, Phandalin, the Spider's Web, and the Wave Echo Cave, which also correlates, go figure, to the major quest lines that I actually have here in different tabs for Goblin Arrows, Phandalin, the Spider's Web, and Wave Echo Cave. Now, when we jump into a quest line, for example, so if we go into Goblin Arrows, you can see here that I have a notes tab in addition to the kind of major story points of that particular adventure. So we have Goblin Ambush. I haven't written it all out here on purpose because of the fact that we're going to be covering this in a future video, in addition to Cragmaw Hideout. And I do have a little bit of an example of how I run a dungeon within OneNote here. As you can see, we have the Krogmat hideout with the different kind of encounter landmarks of 1, 2, 3, 4, and each one of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 correlates to a spot on the map. So as your players progress through the actual hideout, what I also like to do is I like to take this map and include it in each one of these, as well as a zoomed in portion of that particular encounter. If you're using the options or the adventure from D&D Beyond, what's really nice is that you obviously get this map, but you also get a player version of the map, so you can actually just kind of zoom in on that portion of the map if you ever have a combat encounter or something like that, and your players can kind of go through it on the grid. If you choose to run it on a tabletop with actual grid paper, you can grab grid easel paper, or you can grab one of those like dry erase kind of style maps and draw it all out yourself. Or on the flip side, you can also just do Theater of the Mind. That works too. And I like to say that if you're going to do it that way, you want to kind of use increments of 30 feet, because most objects or most creatures can move 30 feet. So it makes it very easy for you to do the math in your head. But either way, this is the way I like to organize my dungeons, and just kind of have these like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these kind of landmarks that are shown here on the map as well. And then we got locations here. Now, it's a little bit counterintuitive because there is a part known as Phandalin in as far as the quest lines that are in the actual adventure. So there is going to be some stuff here in this tab. But if I go over to locations, what I have here is I have the different kind of major landmarks. Well, 2 of them, at least right now, while I'm still preparing for future videos for y'all, that will actually correlate to landmarks in the town of Phandalin, but then also the NPCs that can be found in that area. So for example, we have here the Stonehill Inn. Within the Stonehill Inn, we have the innkeeper, Toblin Stonehill, as well as Narth, who is an old farmer, Elsa, a barmaid, Lenar, the miner, Charlena, the innkeeper's wife, Pip, the innkeeper's son, and then Frida, a weaver. And the reason why I organize it in this way is so that way I know that these NPCs, generally speaking, are going to be at this particular landmark in town. So that way I know when the players go in, I know which NPCs they are going to run into, as well as descriptions for each one. Now, that's the way I like to do it, just so that way it makes most sense. That way we have these little tabs here, and the way you make this is you just make these sub pages of the topic. So you can see here I just made the innkeeper a sub page of a sub page. Now it's promoted back up. It just makes life really easy for you folks when you're kind of trying to figure out where do these people belong. The other thing I like to do is I also do like to write notes within these. Now you don't see anything in here right now because I'm still kind of fleshing it out, but I like to write notes in here like on how the adventurers interact with these particular people. Let's say if they do something to slight them, we can write different kind of notes about what happened in that interaction, so that way we know the disposition of this particular NPC towards the players over the course of time, stuff like that. So also in case they you know, the players accidentally kill them or they die for other reasons, for story reasons or whatever. But as you can see here, we have Phandalin up here. Now if I wanted to add, let's say Neverwinter, all I have to do is add a new section and actually just rename it Neverwinter. For whatever reason, this version of OneNote loves to mess with me a little bit, but there you go. There's Neverwinter, and we can add other landmarks and stuff like that into this tab as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is actually going to end this part 1 introduction to how to run the Lost Mines of Phandelver. Like I said, we will be covering each adventure quest line in its own individual parts here on the channel in the future. So if you guys want to get alerted to when that happens, make sure you subscribe and make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when that stuff comes in, and also like the video if you enjoyed what you saw here. In addition, you can also check us out on Twitch. We actually are developing our Patreon slowly but surely. We actually are going to be developing nice templates and other kind of tools for the Dungeon Master to utilize in your own games that you'll get access to by being a Patreon member. So make sure you stay tuned for that, as well as behind the scenes and like sneak peeks to what's to come soon. In fact, the folks that are on Patreon will actually get to see this video first before it actually comes out on YouTube. Anyway, like I said, I hope you all learned something. I hope this takes away the mystique about running your first adventure, if this is your first adventure, or gives you some really good context on how to set up the Lost Mine of Phandelver for yourself. One of the more iconic adventures that I feel like almost everyone's kind of run as a Dungeon Master, as a kind of rite of passage. So I hope this was helpful, and until next time, happy gaming.